Elsa and Fred follows the story of a widowed old man who finds solace in the company of his terminally ill senior citizen neighbor. The film opens with a shot of Elsa in bed, sick, and watching an old movie. The opening credits roll with a shot of 60s-esque visuals in the background. The next morning, Lydia, Fred's daughter, is shown ordering movers on how to get stuff inside an apartment inside Elsa's building. Elsa emerges from her apartment and asks the homeowner if Lydia is moving there, to which he replies that she is not, but her father Fred is. Her house is close by in the suburbs, and she wants her father to live closer to her, since her mother has passed. Elsa nods and goes on to get into her car. While reversing the car, she rams into a silver Dodge Charger, owned by Fred's son-in-law. Fred's grandson is there and sees that Elsa did it, but Elsa signals him to stay quiet and drives off. The camera moves back to the apartment, where Lydia is making the final preparations before her father arrives in his new home. She introduces Laverne, who she hired as an aide for Fred, and asks her to take care of him. Meanwhile, Fred and his son-in-law arrive at the apartment, and he sees the damaged car and freaks out. He goes upstairs and questions it, but Lydia denies all knowledge. Fred insists that he doesn't need to move in there, and that his old house was perfectly fine. Then he goes on a rant about how he doesn't want a random woman in his house, and wants to fire Laverne, but she mentions that she already quit her other job, so he agrees to let her stay, as long as she stays off his back and doesn't touch his guitar. Lydia's son then says that he saw an old lady back up and hit the car. Elsa is shown driving to her doctor's appointment, on the phone with her elder son, who insists that he should accompany her, but she promises she will be completely fine. Later that evening, Fred and family are shown setting up the new apartment, and Fred is bickering at Laverne to put stuff where it belongs. Lydia walks in with some pizza and instructs Laverne that she will have to buy groceries starting the following day. Elsa and her son walk into their apartment, and they cross paths with Lydia's family, but Elsa hides her face and rushes in. Elsa's son then asks her why she withdrew $2,000 from his account, but she keeps changing the subject. Subsequently, she confesses she withdrew the money to help her younger son Alec. There is a loud knock on the door, and Lydia and her family barge in, threatening to call the police for damaging their car and threatening their son. They have a minor argument, and Elsa's son offers to take care of the car repairs and leaves, after leaving a blank check for Elsa to fill in once the quotation for the repairs is announced. He calls Elsa the next day to say that the car will cost $1,500 to repair, and to give the check to Lydia's father Fred. He then tells her that it's his daughter Carla's birthday after 2 weeks, and emphasizes she must not forget. When Elsa goes to give Fred the check, she is first greeted by Laverne in the apartment. Fred is lying down on his bed watching the news. They have a conversation about them both being widowers, although Fred has only been a widower for 7 months, while Elsa has been a widow for 27 years. Elsa leaves the check on the table, mentioning that she could feed her grandchildren for a fortnight with that amount, and leaves. As she is about to enter her apartment, Laverne emerges from Fred's apartment and gives her the check back. Apparently Fred said grandchildren are more important than cars. Elsa calls him a bear with angel wings, and smiles. Back home, Elsa tries to spy on Fred through the windows, and leaves for the supermarket right when Laverne does. There, they have a chat about Fred being stubborn. Lydia and her husband Jack visit Fred and ask if Elsa gave him the check for the car. He says she didn't, because she paid cash. Jack then continues to pitch an idea about Never Lose Glasses, which is a new product they are trying to introduce into the market, and asks for Fred's help with investment, $60,000. He declines and goes straight to bed, where Lydia sits by his side and asks for his help. He replies that he will think about it, and Lydia states that the original amount they require for investment is actually $90,000. Lydia's son Michael visits Fred after they leave, wanting to take him to the park, but Fred declines summarily. Anticipating this, Michael brought video games as a backup. In a restaurant, Elsa meets with her younger son Alec, an aspiring artist who is in constant need of money. He tells his mom that he requires $1,500 for the registration fee for an art exhibition, exactly the amount of money on the check Fred returned to her. Later that night, Fred is seen relentlessly pounding at Elsa's door, shouting for help. As Elsa opens the door, she comes across Fred, completely soaked in water, and he tells her that his faucet broke and started spraying water all over his house. Elsa manages to subdue the water pressure by turning off the main pipe. After a while, that same night, she prepares a frozen dinner, gets dressed in fancy clothes, and takes the food to Fred, where she proclaims that this is her signature dish from back when she used to be a restaurant owner. She sees a guitar on Fred's wall and asks him to play something, but he reveals that he had an accident with a hacksaw which left his right tendon severed, rendering him unable to play. He hands her the plate and asks her to leave. The next morning, Armand, the building's handyman, is seen repairing Fred's broken faucet. Elsa takes advantage of the open door and sneaks into Fred's apartment, where she sits and tries to converse with Fred, who is totally oblivious and wants to be left alone. Elsa tells her that he views life as a burden, but this is not the case, and she wants to show him how beautiful life can be through little baby steps. She goes on to take dance lessons, but is rejected for being old. Fred's doctor visits him and tells him he should get out more. That evening, Fred is about to take his sleeping pills, but decides not to, gets dressed up, and goes to Elsa's apartment. Elsa is delighted to see him and invites him in for tea. She tells him that in her younger days, she looked exactly like Anita Ekberg, and nobody even knew the difference. They have a conversation over tea, where Elsa jokingly tells him that she dated Pablo Picasso, and that he drew a portrait of her. The pair then go to the park around the corner everyone had been telling Fred about, and Fred says he doesn't see anything out of the ordinary. Elsa asks him if he really hated his wife, to which he replies that she was a good woman, but they had misunderstandings. She then goes on to ask if Fred was happy, and Fred gets upset and demands to leave. At home, he contemplates whether he really was happy in his life, or perhaps he was just pretending to be. He buys some flowers at a store, presumably for the first time in his life, and goes to his wife's gravesite. It is revealed that Fred never really visited his wife even once over the 8 months since she passed. He asks her posthumously if they were happy, but is somewhat ashamed and embarrassed by the fact that he already knows the answer, it being that they were in fact not happy. He plants the flowers at the pot on his wife's gravesite and leaves. His friend John visits him and tells him that he has found love. Fred is very astonished to see that John's girlfriend is a very young, beautiful woman. Elsa knocks on the door, and Fred introduces her to John. Elsa asks if Fred is ready for step 3 of her plan to get him to appreciate life more. She tells him that she will be waiting for him downstairs. John looks at Fred and smiles, suggesting that he's in love. But Fred denies this and says nothing can be said just yet. It is heavily implied that Fred is slowly but surely starting to warm up to Elsa and others around him, leaving his old colorless ways of life behind. Elsa drives them to dance class. However, Fred sees the dancers and is both disgusted and enraged. He berates Elsa for taking him there and says he wants nothing to do with her anymore. He storms out and hails a taxi to leave. That same day, Elsa also gives Alec the check for $1,500 he needed for the art show exhibition. Elsa is shown at her doctor's office the next day, where Raymond, her older son, demands to come in with her, but she declines. She doesn't want him to hear the bad news she knows is coming. She goes in and the doctor has a rather uncomfortable face, as if not wanting to tell her the results, but she states that she already knows them and just doesn't know how much time she has left. Back home, she lies in bed watching La Dolce Vita, a movie she admires very much, and wanted to reenact with her husband but was unable to do so. As she progresses through the movie, the memory of her husband starts coming back to her, and she starts getting tears in her eyes. Fred is watching all of this through his curtains, and starts to feel bad about berating Elsa earlier at the dance class. He is visibly guilty and ashamed when Elsa knocks on his door. She apologizes for taking him to dance class, and offers to make up for it by taking him to the fanciest French restaurant in town. Fred, still keeping his stoic, hardcore persona, outright declines, and insults Elsa again for making him look like an old fool in front of all those young people in the dance class. He is visibly angry, and says that he didn't ask Elsa for help because he saw something in her, but it was just because he couldn't bend down to turn off the main pipe. There is nothing between them and there will be nothing between them. He heads off to the bedroom, but has a sudden change of mind when Elsa is visibly distraught, claiming she cared about him the moment she laid eyes on him. Swayed by his own guilt and unwilling to keep fighting, he gets dressed, and the pair are off to the restaurant. Fred asks what they are, to which Elsa replies she doesn't know just yet, and that she couldn't help herself falling in love with him. Their desserts arrive, and Elsa asks Fred to dip his finger in the ice cream to properly enjoy it. Fred follows suit and finally laughs loudly, for the first time in the film, signifying how much spending time with Elsa has changed him. Elsa then goes on to explain the beauty of life even more, and tells him that she doesn't know how long they have, but she does know to make the best out of it. The pair then raise a toast to life, and the waiter brings their bill. Fred takes a look at the bill which says $400 and remarks on the price, to which Elsa suggests they simply don't pay. She tells him to get up on the count of 3 and leave. Fred is skeptical, but Elsa counts down quickly. The waiter comes back, and upon seeing the empty bill, chases them outside the restaurant, but they narrowly escape. Right around the corner, Elsa's car breaks down, and they evade the police by ducking in the car. Fred and Elsa share a chuckle, but shortly after, Fred feels pain in his right arm, possibly hinting towards a heart attack. They rush to the hospital to find that this was caused by drinking, eating rich foods, and experiencing intense emotions all at once, all of which Fred experienced within the past 2 hours. The doctor gives him a pill and they leave, hand in hand, laughing, calling each other husband and wife. The doctor remarks how adorable they look together. In the building corridor, they share a kiss, and Elsa asks if she can spend the night at Fred's apartment. He agrees, and in the morning, plays a beautiful melody with the guitar, on which Elsa compliments him. Armin sees her leaving Fred's place and smiles. Lydia arrives to visit her father and discovers him taking a bath in the afternoon, which he rarely ever does. She also discovers that he has flushed all his pills down the toilet. And to make matters worse, he has relieved Laverne of her duties and gotten her a new job. He exclaims that if he doesn't need pills, he won't take them, and asks Lydia to leave. Elsa and Fred then take a ride in Elsa's car, and both of them sing along to the songs and have a great time. Fred is shown gradually leaving behind his dull, embittered lifestyle, and embracing one with more sense of appreciation, more color, and more livelihood. He gets a shave, buys new clothes, and cooks with Elsa. He asks Elsa to look at the ingredients board, where he has written, "I love you." This prompts Elsa to hug him tightly. He is finally appreciating the beauty in everyday chores, not like before, where all he did was bicker at people and be tired all day, laying in bed watching the news. Meeting Elsa finally turned a new leaf for him, and he is now a completely changed man. One who praises and adores everything normal, instead of just living out his days like a meaningless entity. Elsa and Fred then dance together to old music in Fred's apartment. Then they go to Alec's art exhibition, where Elsa introduces Fred as her boyfriend to her sons. Fred tells Alec that he knows how difficult it is to have 5 children and be lacking financially. This statement takes Alec completely by surprise, because only his brother Raymond has children, that being an only daughter, Carla. Fred then realizes that the story Elsa told about her youngest granddaughter April being terminally ill was just a lie to get out of not paying the $1,500 for the car, and instead paying Alec to set up his exhibition. Fred is angered and storms out, but Elsa follows him and apologizes swiftly, causing them to patch up again. The next morning, Elsa is getting ready for her granddaughter Carla's birthday, when her son Raymond asks why she didn't tell him about Fred. She asks him if he's saying she's too old to date, but he simply replies that the whole thing points to her being irresponsible, because she doesn't have much time left due to her terminal illness anyway. She says that Fred doesn't know, and that she has no intention of telling her. Outside the apartment building, the mother-son duo find Fred and ask him to join them for Carla's birthday party, to which Fred gladly agrees to come. Once there, Alec arrives with a painting of the body of a duck he intends to give Carla, because it'll be worth a fortune someday, and she can make a load of money off of it. Elsa asks Alec if his father will be showing up. Upon Alec inquiring why, she says that she told Fred that she was a widow, another lie she told to be able to resonate with Fred. Alec replies that it is highly unlikely their father will come to the party. But to everyone's surprise, Elsa's ex-husband shows up, with a pink bicycle as a gift for Carla. He comes right when they're about to take the family picture, and Fred walks out on Elsa again. He demands an explanation, to which Elsa replies that to her ex-husband is gone, and goes on to tell him a story about how he cheated on her, and how she went to a stripper bar in London to get back at him. Fred is outrageous and says that he wants to trust her, but all of these lies, this weird story about Picasso, and all of this drama is making it very difficult for him to do so. He barges out, running into and yelling at a baffled Lydia as he goes. He asks why she came in the first place, to which she says that she wanted to know the answer to whether he would invest in the glasses. He says that he will, in fact, invest in it, and asks her to stop by before making the deal, so they can go and sign the check at the bank. Max, Elsa's husband, stops by Fred's house to warn him about something. He says that Elsa has extreme difficulty differentiating dreams from reality, and is in a constant haze-like daydreaming state, which renders her unable to distinguish between what is real and what is not. He says that Elsa tells lies, and is so caught up in her own lies that she gets trapped in them and starts believing them as true statements. This is a hint towards Elsa having extreme mental health issues, and possibly delusions and hallucinations. Fred asks Max if he really cheated on her. Max states that Elsa was the one who cheated, and that she's never been to London in her life, rather it was right there in New Orleans. Right before Max is about to leave, asks him if Elsa really resembled Anita Ekberg in her youth, to which he replies no, she was even prettier, the most beautiful blonde in New Orleans. He asks Fred not to make the same mistake he did, not to let Elsa go. Fred finally realizes his mistake, and gazes into Elsa's empty apartment with heavy eyes and a broken heart. He looks down at the road to find Elsa getting into a taxi, and rushes down to stop her and tells her they need to talk. But Elsa hurriedly gets in the taxi cab and leaves. Fred hails another one, and asks the driver to follow Elsa's cab. Upon following the cab, he ends up at a dialysis center, learning that Elsa is terminally ill. This shatters his heart, and he asks his friend Dr. John what Elsa's best chance is. John says it mainly depends on various factors, but someone with Elsa's age and demeanor has very little to no chance of making it alive. Fred says he knows what he has to do, and leaves. He then arrives at Elsa's house with a rose and some tickets to Rome, where he plans to finally bring Elsa's dream of reenacting the scene from Dolce La Vita at the Trevi Fountain true. Elsa is over the moon upon listening to this. Next week, the couple arrive in Rome, and begin sightseeing and enjoying themselves. Fred asks Elsa if she is ready yet, but Elsa declines, and says she will tell him when she is. Meanwhile, Lydia and Jack come to Fred's apartment to find him gone, leaving a note that confesses he spent the glasses' money on himself, and his girlfriend, and apologizing for being a terrible father, but this time, he's prioritizing his own happiness. This catches Lydia completely off guard, and she tells Jack she doesn't care if they get the investment or not, because this is the first time Fred has ever apologized to her, or to anyone else for that matter. Back in Rome, Elsa and Fred are having the time of their lives. They are shown riding chariots and having romantic lunches along the Italian shoreline. One fine day, Elsa says she is finally ready to go to the fountain the following night, but everything has to be perfect, and they need to have the same cat as Anita had in the movie, a small white one. Fred goes to a pet shop, which is closed, but fortunately finds an orange-white cat in a nearby alley, whom he decides will do. He comes back, gets dressed, and waits for Elsa to come out. Elsa comes out, dressed exactly like Anita Ekberg in Dolce La Vita, and Fred is amazed by how beautiful she looks. They head to the fountain, where this movie and Dolce La Vita play side by side. One side shows Fred and Elsa, the other one shows Marcello and Anita. They almost perfectly reenact the scene, fulfilling Elsa's lifelong dream of doing so. They have a romantic dance under the fountain, and finally confess their love for each other. After a couple of days, Elsa passes away, and Raymond is seen getting something from her apartment. He comes to Fred and hands her an envelope. He says his mother asked him to personally deliver it to Fred. Fred opens the envelope, a portrait of Elsa, drawn by Pablo Picasso.